Chapter 10. Renee. Renee followed Maria to the last tent. This child seemed to be in better shape than the girl she'd looked at previously, but she would still feel better if she were treated at the hospital. Thankfully, the woman seemed to understand and speak some English. "Your daughter is very sick. Can we take her to the hospital for treatment?" "Can I come with her?" the mother asked. "I've been suffering from the same thing." "Of course." Renee texted Yolanda to send another ambulance and then looked at the woman. "Do you think you can walk?" "I believe so," the woman said. She was a petite Hispanic woman, and Renee could tell she had once been pretty, but life hadn't been kind to her recently. Her hair hung in greasy strings around her face, and dark circles ringed her eyes. But there was something else, something Renee couldn't quite put her finger on. As the woman grabbed a bag and shoved what little clothing they had into it, Renee gathered up the girl. She was probably about 6, but she felt much lighter. The girl was probably malnourished on top of suffering from cholera. Maria wrapped an arm around the woman, and they all exited the tent. As Renee stepped outside, she came face to face with Garrett and gasped. "What happened to you?" Garrett's nose was swollen and purple. Dried blood was caked underneath it, and the beginning signs of bruising under his eyes were popping up.
"I met the coyote. He wasn't happy we took the boy and his mother to the hospital. Are these two going back as well?"
"They are. I've already texted Yolanda to send another ambulance, and you're going to let me check that nose out when we get back."
"It's fine," he said. "I bet it's not even broken."
"That was not a request, doctor." Garrett sighed. She knew he wanted to act macho, but he also knew that she was right. A broken nose generally healed on its own, unless the break was bad enough to need surgery.
"Fine. I'll let you look at it after we get the kids taken care of. I want to make sure the boy we sent earlier has what he needs, since I think he was the worst case."
"Yeah, that's fine. I'll head back with these two." "Thank you both for coming," Maria said as they reached the ambulance.
"Yolanda will be alerting the CDC about the outbreak if they all test positive, which means the city will have to do something. But please let us know if any more kids get sick."
"I will." Garrett placed the girl in the ambulance, helped her mother in, and then climbed in. As it drove away, the woman placed a hand on Renee's arm. "How much longer before the next one arrives?" she asked, her eyes darting around. "Soon, I promise." The woman nodded, but her posture did not relax. Renee wasn't sure if it was because the woman didn't feel well, because she was worried about her kid, or if it was something else. A few minutes later, the last ambulance arrived, and when everyone was situated, they headed back to the hospital. The emergency room was bustling like normal as Renee called out instructions for the nurses who approached them. "Another one?" Anne asked. "Can't you take them upstairs?" "We don't have room upstairs." Renee knew their ward was pretty full, unless Yolanda had released some while they were gone. Besides, if the mothers are sick, they'll need treatment too. "Fine. I can't believe it could be cholera. I thought that was eradicated in the U.S. "You didn't see these conditions. Dr. Young even got punched by a coyote." "Yeah, I saw his nose. I'm assuming the coyote knows he brought them here?" "I don't know. Why?" Renee asked. She wanted to wash up, change her clothes, and check on Garrett, not talk about the coyote. "Because he might come here looking for them. After you fix up Dr. Young, send him to security so they at least know who they're watching for." "Will do. Do you know what room he's in?" "He's in 2. Anne pulled a bag from under the nurse's station and held it out to Renee. "Grab a pair of scrubs from our closet and clean up in our bathroom. Put your clothes and shoes in here until you can wash them." "Right." Renee took the bag and followed Anne's instructions. She didn't have another pair of shoes with her, but thankfully there were some booties in the closet, so at least she didn't have to walk around barefoot. When she was finished in the bathroom, she headed to room 2. Garrett sat on the bed, also wearing a new pair of scrubs and looking at his nose in the mirror.
Okay, it probably is broken, but I don't think it's that bad.
I'll be the judge of that. Lie back. She touched the outside of his nose gently. It wasn't the worst break she'd seen, but the cartilage was out of place. I'm going to need to shift this back into place. Do you want a numbing shot? Garrett shook his head.
No, just do it quickly. I'm sure Yolanda wants us back upstairs.
Okay. As quickly and painlessly as she could, Renee shifted the cartilage back into place, wincing as Garrett grimaced and his eyes began to water. All done. I just need to splint it. As she finished the splint, Garrett's hands grabbed onto hers.
Renee,
he began, but before he could say anything more, the curtain flew open and he dropped her hands. Sorry, are you guys almost done? We need this room, the nurse said, looking from Garrett to Renee and back again. If she suspected something, she kept it to herself. Not that there was anything to suspect, though Renee desperately wanted to know what Garrett had been about to say.
Yeah, we're good,
Garrett said, hopping off the bed and grabbing his bag. She had hoped he would finish whatever he'd been about to say as they walked to the elevator, but he didn't, and Renee wondered if he ever would. The elevator doors slid open, but as they stepped inside, Renee remembered Anne's words. She punched the button to hold the doors open and turned to him. Anne said you should report the coyote to security in case he shows up here. Garrett nodded.
Good idea. Will you tell Yolanda I'll be up as soon as I'm done?
Of course. Yolanda looked more harried than normal when Renee reached the nurse's station. We're back. The kids are all checked in at the ER and Garrett is on his way. He just had to stop at security first. Security? What for? Yolanda asked. He got punched by a coyote and Anne wanted him to fill security in just in case the guy decided to come here. Okay, well, we're a little behind because we were short-staffed, so can you do the intake in room 4? Of course. Renee had been hoping for a small break. She was starving. But that was the life of a nurse. You rested and ate when you could, and that did not mean right now. After a quick stop at the lounge to put away her bag of clothes and pull on her spare shoes, Renee stepped into room 4. A feeling of unease fell over her, and she glanced around the room for what might be causing it. But all she could see was the small boy in the bed who looked pale and miserable, and his mother who stood at the head of the bed, her hand smoothing his forehead. Good afternoon. I'm Nurse Mackey. What seems to be the problem today? Renee asked as she rolled the stool over to sit by the boy's bed. He woke up vomiting this morning and hasn't been able to keep anything down, his mother said. I see. And is anyone else in the family sick? No, I thought at first it was food poisoning, but then the rest of us would be sick, right? Most likely, but kids have smaller stomachs and sometimes things affect them differently. A cold shiver ran down Renee's spine, and she tried to shake it off. What was wrong with her? Does Tim have a history of getting sick like this? Renee would pull his medical records afterwards, but it was always good to ask first and hear what the parents said. Not really. He's generally a healthy boy. I mean, he gets sick every year when school starts, but that's pretty normal, right? Renee glanced up and flashed a small smile. It is. We see a lot of cases in September. How about mental issues? Has he been acting out at home or complaining of anything making him sad or depressed? Though she didn't look up, Renee saw the woman tense and another feeling of unease washed over her. He's told me there's a kid bullying him at school some days, but what does any of that have to do with him vomiting today? There was a slight defensive edge to the woman's voice. Maybe nothing, but we have to ask. Renee finished the history intake and then left the room. As soon as she was on the other side of the door, she breathed a huge sigh of relief. She could not explain it, but something hadn't felt right in that room.
"You okay?"
Garrett asked, approaching her. Evidently, he was done with security. Yeah, just got a weird vibe from that room.
"What's the complaint?"
Garrett stepped closer to her to see the history. Vomiting, and the kid is young. He didn't even talk. Mom seemed normal enough, but I'm telling you, something is off.
Okay, I'll go in a second and see what I can decipher.
Thanks. Renee smiled up at him and then saw Yolanda out of the corner of her eye. I better get going. She hurried over to the nurse's station and filed the chart she'd just filled out. Then she grabbed the next one in line. It was several hours later when she got to sit down and take a break. Once in the lounge, she pulled out a snack and her cell phone. She needed to check on her car to determine if she needed a ride tonight. AAA had left her a message with the name of the shop they had towed her car to, so after listening, she dialed the shop. Hi, I'm Renee Mackey. My Mitsubishi Mirage was brought in this morning. Do you have an estimate on when it will be fixed?
Let me check for you.
Renee chewed on her lip as she listened to the rustling of papers on the other end.
Oh, here it is. It looks like it's a faulty crankshaft position sensor. It'll cost about $200, but we can have it ready tomorrow morning. Would you like for us to go ahead?
$200? That was a huge chunk of change, and she knew she could probably do it herself for cheaper if she knew how, but she didn't, and she needed her car. Okay, yeah, go ahead. She'd just have to eat ramen the next few weeks or see if she could pick up a few extra shifts. The door to the lounge opened and she looked up to see Garrett enter.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know anyone was in here.
It's okay. I was just calling about my car. They said it will be done tomorrow morning. I hate to ask, but I have something really important tonight. I don't suppose you could drop me off when you get off? If you can't, that's okay too. I'm sure I can find someone who can. Riley might be on. Garrett shook his head.
It's fine. We probably get off about the same time. I'm actually glad I found you. I wanted to talk to you about Tim Boyer, the boy in room 4.
It took Renee a second to figure out who he meant, but then it clicked. The vomiting kid. Did you figure out what's wrong with him?
Not exactly. His blood test showed toxic chemicals, but at a low level. I'm going to give him some activated charcoal and discuss locking up chemicals at home. It's possible he accidentally got into something.
Possible? But you don't think so? Renee's interest was piqued. She had felt something was off in the room, but there had been a lot going on, too. Still, she trusted her gut, and her gut had sensed something.
I don't know. I just got a weird feeling in that room, like something wasn't right.
I am so glad you felt the same way. That's exactly what I thought. I don't even know what wasn't right, just that something wasn't.
Let's leave a note in the file. There isn't much else we can do. There's no history of abuse or even medical conditions like these. So we have nothing to tell CPS besides a feeling, and that's not enough to get anything done. I am going to add them to my prayer journal, though.
You keep a prayer journal?
I do.
He crossed the room to sit beside her.
I told you my life was pretty messy before I left Chicago. I wasn't really letting God lead, and when everything fell apart, I determined I was going to change that. The prayer journal is a good way to help me keep that promise.
I love that, she said, her throat constricting with emotion. He was looking at her in that way again, the way that made her think he was interested. Garrett, The lounge door opened, and Shonda, the new nurse, stepped inside. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I interrupting something? Not at all, Renee said with a sigh. My break is over anyway, so I better get back out there. Just before the door shut behind her, Renee chanced one more look back at Garrett. She wanted to invite him with her tonight, but what if he said no?